The fire burning red and a Joshua representing if it comes hard here. You know. Big up Kidaki, Buxton Massive. Hey Babylon boy, you going like you like come son. Red.
Never joke, never joke, never joke. Oh, money never, money never, money never, money never, money never, money. Now know what you can have in money. Money never, money never, money never, money never, money never, money. You can keep, you can have in money. When you've been up for a bum, in a biz there be money. Now because your money done, you come with conniving money. When you had your pocket full, in a biz there be money. Now because your money done, you hustle for tell me money. Yes, money never, money never, money, money never, money, money. Now know what you conniving money. Neighbor, neighbor, joker. Neighbor, neighbor, joker. Neighbor, neighbor, joker. That's all the money that we work for. A 2 pound note and a kill a piece. A 2 pound note and a kill a piece. A 2 pound note and a kill a piece. This is all the money that we work for. I said money, neighbor. Money, neighbor, money. Money, neighbor, money. Money, I know what you can have in money. Oh, Joseph.
Guyana and Guyanese, at home and abroad. Tune in to Guyanese Morning Time, hosted by Kadaki Amsterdam, where the sun always shines. Guyanese Morning Time, the people call it Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people call it Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again. We rise up early morning watching Comes TV, where wisdom and knowledge, yes, it is the key. Exposing corruption over land and sea, where the wicked politicians they try to trick me. Guyana is a land for everybody. With 6 races should live in harmony. Is one set of people getting oil money. Is one set of people doing the thievery. Beep. Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again. This is a program that you all can see, sharing your views and your integrity. Like it, comment and share it all around. Pass it to your neighbor, safe and sound. A sad situation going on in this town. The voice of the people is getting trampled down. Out of the mouths of babes and sucklings, with Jah as ordained me to sing. I sing Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, fooling the people. You're promoting evil. Stop lying to the people. You are a part of the cycle. Stop fooling people. You're promoting evil. Stop lying to the people. You are a part of the cycle. I say Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again. We got Brickford, Bork, and Mark Benchcop. David Hines and Kadaki Amsterdam. Sherrod Duncan, Nigel London. Normal Brown and Gavin Matthews. Big up Paslow, Port People Governor. Simona Brooms, Robin Simpson. Hampton Green and Winston Jordan. And yes, we can go right on and on. Guyanese morning time. The people calling Guyanese morning time. Rhythm, Guyanese morning time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese morning time. The people calling Guyanese morning time. Rhythm, Guyanese morning time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again.
The relatives and friends of young Wyndham Bacchus, they deserve justice. The family, the relatives and friends of our in Boston, they deserve justice. The family, the relatives and friends of Peter Headley, they deserve justice.
And so when we say that Guyana is an apartheid state, we have the evidence to show.
Do you want to know what happened in 1763 during the Berbice Revolution? On Saturday, August 31st, you can come and hear Professor Marjolaine Cars, author of the book Blood on the River. This is your opportunity to learn what really happened hundreds of years ago, and you will hear it from the voices of those who were there. This is the first in the series of Epadaji talks on issues relevant to our people. Call 223-8852-3 to reserve your seat. Epadaji Talks, celebrating our heroes. The Berbice Slave Revolution, Saturday, August 31st, Theatre Guild, Georgetown, 16 hours. That's 4 p.m. Hey fans, it's karaoke and oldies night this and every Thursday at Club Twilight Sideline Dam, Buxton. Dance to the magical songs of yesteryear by popular DJs and Camps Audio. Admission is free. Come out, let's make memories at Club Twilight Sideline Dam, Buxton North.
Comes out your son. You burn the swine when no why you shine. The tree of life, them no why you climb, cause them out no kind. Comes I say them out no kind. Buxton Massive, Kidaki, Red Hat.
You can get meat anywhere, but for the best cuts of chicken, beef, pork, mutton, and lots more, check out T&W Harris Butcher Shop, located in the East Rheinveld Market Meat Section. Call us on 609-7168, 641-4494. Ask for Rastaman. T&W Harris Butcher Shop for the best in fresh cut meats and lots more. Neighbor morning, It's 24 minutes to the 8 o'clock hour on the 28th day of August in the year 2024. How you been? How was your last night? How was it yesterday? How you make out yesterday, really? Things tight in this country. Things tight in this country. 8 stem celery for $500. I could understand, no? 8 stem celery for $500. I see Lisa Prasad saying that, hey, why are you talking about celery is $3,000 and $5,000 a pound, and so you don't cook a pound of celery every day. According to Lisa Prasad calculation, it's what 63 cents an ounce or $63 an ounce or something. And you don't cook 2 pints of rice every day. Lisa Prasad and our government, you don't cook a gallon of rice every day. Lisa Prasad and our government wants us. They want us to live hand to mouth. We must go and buy $100 celery in the morning for cook. And we must buy a pint of rice and quarter pint of oil. Gone were those days. Gone were those days, Lisa Prasad. But it's Wednesday morning. Dr. Hines is in the house. And so I'm not going to be dealing with Lisa Prasad and her issues now. But trust me, maybe tomorrow morning I'm going to address her with the cost of living and this nonsensical idea. You know, we're going to talk about that. Dr. Hines, welcome to the program. What are you doing?
Good morning.
You are in a position where I'm only seeing the top of your lip on your head, sir. Very well. That's
Good morning.
That's a bit better. Oh, you know, boy, how going on with you? How you got them? Let's talk. It's a week or so since we last talked, and a lot has happened from that time to now. At the top of the agenda, I dare say, is what has happened to the teachers. We noticed that, as some people say, out of left field, when it was least expected that the agreement for that 10% increase was going to be signed, because there was visible divisions among members of the General Council and the teachers themselves, union membership, were certainly not satisfied with that offer and had instructed, according to my understanding, the union leadership to reject it. So when we were expecting, or the society was expecting, that, as we like to say, the union was going to hold out for a better deal, out of the blues, we learned that the agreement was signed, even in the midst of division, because we learned that the General Secretary, among others, walked out of the meeting where the signing took place and so on. I know for a fact that you've been following the teachers' issue. What are your thoughts on what transpired there? What are your thoughts on how such, I want to call it, deception, disrespect for the membership of the union can be prevented in the future?
Well, I don't know how it can be prevented in the future. What I do know is that it is part of a long tradition of trade unions in Guyana and the English-speaking Caribbean betraying their members. It is an old. In the old days, they used to call some of the unions company unions. These were unions who colluded with the companies where their membership worked. And they used to call them company unions. Well, after independence, the governments came into being. These unions began to collude with governments. In many regards, the trade unions themselves were part of the political parties. Trade unions preceded political parties. A lot of the political parties in the Caribbean were what you call the political arm of the unions. So when these political parties came into being, in a sense, they owned a lot of the unions. And so when these parties got into power and became the government, the unions had split allegiance to their workers or allegiance to the political party. And ultimately, they would come down on the side of the political party. So we've had this long tradition of unions selling out their workers. By the 1960s, 70s, and 80s in Guyana, workers, especially in the bauxite industry, began to take action outside of their unions. There were two unions in the industry. And between 1966 and 1970, I hope I'm getting my dates right, there were about 40 odd strikes that were called by the workers. They used to call them wildcat strikes, where workers would call strikes without their union. And that continued well into the 1980s in the bauxite industry. At one time in the 1960s, late 1960s or 1970, the ASCREA group in Linden would call strikes at the bauxite industry because their unions were, quote unquote, in bed with the government of the day. And so what happened here continued that long tradition of trade unions and political parties singing out of the same hymn sheet, and the unions leaving their workers high and dry. So that historical footnote ought to be noted here. I think the teachers pushed this thing as far as they could push it. And they got elements within the leadership of the union to be on their side, led by Coretta McDonald and others. They held the teachers' line in the executive. We have been hearing rumblings that the other faction led by President Light had wanted to throw in the towel a long time. remember, they called the teachers off the streets, and they wanted at that time, from our understanding, to really sign an agreement. But they were held off by the militancy of the teachers and the militancy of sections of the leadership. And so, therefore, in the end, there was a maneuver. We understand that a meeting of the General Council was called. They were given 4 hours notice. It was called early in the morning at 6 o'clock, a 10 o'clock meeting. And some of the members of the executive who were opposed to the signing of an agreement in the form that eventually was signed did not get to attend that meeting. And it was at that meeting that a majority was concocted based on what was reported to them. And they agreed that that an agreement should be signed. Now, although the faction that did not want the agreement to be signed went to the membership, and the membership instructed that the union should accept nothing less than, I think, 29%, 26%. The decision by the General Council was binding. You would have had to go back to the General Council to ask them to overturn their decision. Some would argue that the teachers at their meeting and their decision that the union should not accept less than 26%, that should be binding. But the argument is that that meeting did not constitute an official members' meeting. And so therefore, the General Council decision carried. And the President and Vice President and others went and signed the agreement. So I think that points to the crisis in trade unionism in Guyana, that workers have lost interest. They don't have confidence in the union leadership. And so, lack of confidence in the union leadership and the government crushing of the power of the union leave workers in Guyana vulnerable, public service workers, very vulnerable, as we can see. In effect, the agreement that was signed was the agreement that was the proposal that the government initially made that drove the workers to go on strike. Remember, it was 6.5%. 10% is nowhere substantially different from the 6.5%. So what drove the teachers on strike eventually is what the union signed. The government got its way. Its initial proposal carried the day. Its refusal to bargain for 5 years between 2019 and 2023. It got its way there. It got its way with the percentage that it gave. And so, really, the agreement was not a negotiated settlement. A negotiated settlement would have been something like this. The government offers 10%. The teachers say 39%. You negotiate, eventually you give them 25%. The teachers give 15%, the government gives 15%. And it falls there at 125, which is close to what the teachers said they want. That would have been a negotiated settlement. But that is not what occurred here. It is the government proposal that was signed. The union really negotiated nothing for its workers, for its membership. If you look at the allowances, which the government is touting, you look at the allowances, the teachers' union had put forward proposals for the allowances. And when you look at what the government eventually gave them, it was substantially lower than what the teachers had proposed. So even at the level of the allowance, the government got its way. What the government gave us, the allowance, is far less than what the teachers' union had proposed. So even this allowance thing that the government is touting is really substantially less than what the teachers wanted. And when you look at the allowance really is, the allowances are weighted. First of all, the allowances, as I said, are not substantial. Second, they are weighted towards the group of teachers that have master's degrees and PhD, which is the percentage of teachers with master's and PhD, very, very low. I don't think it's more than 5% of the teaching staff. There are very few teachers that have PhD. There are some that have masters. So I think it's about 5 to 7% that really the allowances, the meager allowances, the majority of it is going just to that small percentage. The more than 90% of the teachers, really the allowances are negligible. So you have a negligible increase in wages, negligible allowances, and so really the teachers got nothing.
Thank you, Dr. Hines. Indeed, when you look at the offers of allowances, which the government seems to want to make its case on, that they're giving so many quote-unquote non-salaried benefits and so on, the benefits really and truly are not benefits across the board. They're not benefits across the board. They're for specific, and Coretta, the General Secretary, was here last Friday, and she explained that even for example, the duty-free concessions that they've given, a lot of those concessions have already been used up, right? They've already been used up. And a very small number perhaps is left, and only a small number of people can benefit from them. When you look at, all right, this thing is signed. Are the teachers bound by it from your reading?
Well, the teachers are not bound by anything. The union has signed an agreement, and it is legal, but the teachers can reject it, and they control their leadership and put in place new leadership and instruct them to renegotiate the contract. The workers can take control of their unions and do anything. It is only binding insofar as the present executive agrees to it. The present leadership, they signed it, they agreed to it, but the workers can recall their leadership and put in place new leadership to go and negotiate for them.
Okay, good. So possibly renegotiation. But Dr. Hines, as I would say, mistreatment of public servants and more particularly teachers continue from this government. I was saying yesterday that instead of addressing the plight of the people in terms of the cost of living and the need to adjust wages and salaries to livable levels, the government apparently prefers to invest in sandstone and cement and so on. We noticed recently the announcement that they're going to be building or proposing to build a new Berbice River Bridge. I noticed an invitation. I have an invitation in my inbox from somebody who sent it to me. They're talking about signing the agreement for the reconstruction of the Linden-Suzdijk Highway. Today, that agreement is supposed to be signed. As an aside, the 10-day workers are compelled from Linden. The 10 days workers are compelled to attend that signing ceremony, which obviously really truly has nothing to do with them, but they're compelled to do so. We have already arguments of no fiscal space to give teachers better wages and salaries and all of that, but yet we are seeing all of this spending and the continued treatment, as I call it, of teachers and public servants. The WPA, among other opposition parties, is certainly waiting to replace the PPP government. As we like to say, the opposition should be a government in waiting. You, as the presidential candidate of the Working People's Alliance, a co-leader, what's the position of the WPA in terms of dealing with wages and salaries for the populace in general, and in particular, teachers?
Well, before we get to that, the first part of your formulation that talks about the government spending on infrastructure while not spending on wages for public servants. You see, that comes out of a particular thinking. It must be emphasized that the PPP may be cruel, but they're not crazy. What they're doing is part of a larger view, a larger world view, a larger plan for Guyana. The attitude to wages for public servants. In the old days, the governments used to say they don't have the money. That used to be the rationale for not paying public servants better wages. Some of the economists would cite things like inflation, that, you know, too much money in the system may not be good. And so, so those were the two rationales for not raising the wages of workers. The governments didn't have money, and the economists were talking a lot about inflation. Now, in the present era, the government does have a lot of money. And I'm reliably informed from economists that the threat of inflation arising from increased wages is not as threatening as it was, let's say, 20 years ago. And the economists can explain that. So the conditions have changed. Although the conditions have changed, the government is still holding on to not paying public service workers more. Why? The government is of the view that public servants, including teachers and government workers and policemen and women and so on, they do not produce tangible goods and services. And so therefore, the investment, the return from the investment in teachers and public servants is not as great as, let's say, you invest in sugar workers who are producing sugar, producing sugar cane and so on, or construction workers who are building things. So they're making a distinction between categories of workers. That public servants are not productive in a direct way as other categories of workers. So that's part of the worldview. When you couple that with the fact that public servants, including teachers, belong to an ethnic group that is not part of the natural constituency of the ruling party, it means that the ruling party does not see itself as having the responsibility of upgrading the well-being of that section, because they're not going to vote for them. It explains why the government treats sugar workers and deals with the sugar workers' unions differently from public servants and their unions. Because they're not going to vote for you. You don't have any incentive politically to upgrade them. So that's the second factor at work here. The third factor at work is the ethnic factor. The PPP leadership, for the most part, comes out of the Indian Guyanese community, and it adopts a worldview, an Indianist worldview that sees the two ethnic groups in competition, and the government sees part of its responsibility is to ensure that the competing ethnic group is not empowered. So when you take those three factors, the ethnic factor, the political factor, and the economic thinking, then you understand the attitude of the government to teachers. Let me repeat. One, teachers are not productive, according to the government's thinking. And so therefore, the return from investing in them is not as great as if you invest in construction workers or sugar workers, or as the case may be. So that's number one. Number two, these workers are not in your political camp. They're not going to vote for you. And governments, by their very nature, look after their supporters first. And insofar as they look after the others, they look after them afterwards. So looking after the welfare, the general welfare of public servants is not in the political interest of the PPP. It doesn't bring them dividends. They don't get votes. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is the ethnic factor, where we have ethnic competition for resources. And the PPP comes out of one ethnic community. And so naturally it would aid and abet and give advantage to its own ethnic group in competition with other ethnic groups. So when you put those three factors together, I hope viewers are getting a clearer view of what drives the PPP. You see, understandably, people cause Jack Dio, they cause Ali, they cause the PPP, they cause this body, they cause that body, and so on and things. And indeed, Jack Dio and them need plenty cussing. But the danger with that approach is that we feel that if you remove Jabdeo and you put another member of the PPP, things will improve. It will change. And it will not. It will not. The PPP is moving from a coherent set of values that creates a worldview that is driving their action in government. So, understandably, I am not telling people they must cuss Jabdeo and so on. I cuss it too. But the limitations of that approach is that it ignores the programmatic and the coherent set of ideas and values that drive the PPP. So that if Jabdeo is removed, it doesn't make a difference, because the philosophy is what is driving them. So when you look at the way they've dealt with the teachers, and you ask yourself, why are they so stubborn? Why are they not giving an inch? You have to take those three factors into consideration. You have to take those three factors into consideration.
I'm here.
Yeah.
The other part of the question was the WPA's how was the WPA's position on wages and salaries in general, and particularly how it intends to deal with the teachers' issue in terms of.
Well, we feel wages are important in Guyanese context, and generally speaking, because of the high cost of living. Prices in the market are very high. The market determines prices. And so therefore, if you're a government, how do you deal with that? Do you regulate the market? As some countries have done in the old communist countries, they regulate the market. And even in capitalist countries, they do regulate the market to some extent. But the government has two choices. Do you interfere with the market to bring down prices or stall prices? Or do you take another approach? That is to put more money in the pockets of the citizens so that they can afford the goods and services in the market. As I've said repeatedly on this program and my own program, that when we talk about the high cost of living, we are in effect talking about low wages. The cost of living is high because your wages do not permit you to afford the things in the market. If your wages were higher, you could then afford things in the market. And that in effect is what we may call loosely a lowering of the cost of living. Because the cost of labor, our salaries and wages has gone up. And is almost on par with the cost of living. So workers will be able to break even if their wages allow them to afford the things in the market. And so it's on that basis that we feel that wages and salaries are an important aspect of mitigating the high cost of living. Now, there are other things the government can do. The government can give incentives to producers, to importers, can give, if the government were to make it cheaper to transport agricultural products from farm to market. The understanding, if you build roads and make it easier, then the farmers will be able to bring down their prices, right? And so governments can take that route and do take that route. They, can decrease taxes on imports, and in some instances, they take out the taxes altogether. The hope is that those who are producing or selling goods in the market, when they get these government ease, that would then lead to a lowering of prices. Well, experience has shown that doesn't happen. It doesn't trickle down. The companies take the government relief and they don't necessarily lower prices. In many cases, in most cases, once prices go up, they stay up. They don't come back down. And so we in the WPA feel that the better approach is to invest in increased wages and salaries to help the people mitigate the high cost of living. And that is why we support a universal basic income, in the sense that workers, citizens, are guaranteed an income, a basic income. All citizens are guaranteed that income. And if you are employed, your income from your employment helps. So a universal basic income ensures that there is always money in the hands of workers, and there's adequate money in the hands of workers to deal with inflation, to deal with high cost of living, etc. That is why we have proposed the cash transfer, where you take a small percentage of the revenue from oil and you give that directly to the workers, to the citizens, to families, to use it how they see it fit to use. What you're doing is that you are making money available to the workers. You're making money available to your citizens. All the time you're doing that. And the ultimate intention is for people to be able to mitigate the high cost of living and ultimately to get them out of an impoverished state. You see, we have that high rate of poverty. Close to 50% of our people are impoverished. They are living on $5.50 US, that is 1,100 Guyana dollars or less. And if you're earning $1,100, $1,000 a day, it means that at the end of the month, it's really $28,000 you're earning. What can $28,000 do when you look at the prices in the market? Now, if you give the workers a cash transfer and they get $1 million as cash transfer, that's a windfall for them. It means the debt that they're in. It means the things that they're denying themselves, proper nutritional food. We just saw the damning report that the majority of our people are not eating well. Imagine if that person who's earning $1,000 a day now gets $1 million. They're able to buy better food. They're able, when I was a boy, and probably still know, I was in the Chinese restaurant the other day, and I hear somebody call for chop suey. I said, what? They still get chop suey? And the girl tell me she just buy it for she dog. But chop suey, we used to buy that as small buys and so on. You get a little small piece you can afford. You can afford the fried rice and the lo mein. This chop suey that just make it with ends meat. And we used to buy that as small buys. And so imagine if you now get a cash transfer that is coming in. You're not buying chop suey. You're not going to buy better Chinese food. Instead of having to miss work because you don't got nobody to stay with your child, your young child, you're able now to send that child to daycare because you cannot afford it. And I can go on and on and on. And so therefore, in the WPA, we are very big on the increase in wages. Now, we are not oblivious to things like inflation, with too much money chasing less goods and so on. That is always a possibility. But we feel that that is not the case in Guyana. And so we are erring on the side of increasing the wages of workers, all workers, but especially public servants who have been left behind for decades. The public servants are accustomed to getting 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6%. And when that accumulates over time, that's what we call it starvation wages. Because that is in effect what you are paying public servants, what you're paying teachers. And so therefore, we err on the side of wages. Now, if we have anything to do with government, and we hope we do, if we have anything to do with the education sector, and we hope we do, if we are part of a new government, one of the areas we would like to take charge of is education. And the very first thing we will do is to call the union in, the public service unions, call the teachers union in. And that 39% that the teachers are asking, and I think 30% for next year and 30% for next year, we called them and we said, we're giving you that. As a start, we are giving you that. Then the second thing we will do is work with the teachers to upgrade their salaries to the level of the average at the CARICOM level. We have seen those numbers from CARICOM countries. Some are higher than some, but all of them higher than Guyana. We will take the average of what teachers are earning in the CARICOM countries, and we will upgrade, work with the union. We're not imposing anything. Work with the union to upgrade. There'll be budgetary considerations that will determine whether we do it as a lump sum or we do it incrementally over a year or so. But we would be committed to giving the teachers what they are now asking for. maybe next year, if there's a new government next year, the teachers may up that a little, given the changes in cost of living, etc. Whatever the number is, if and when we take government, we sign off on that with the teachers, and then work with bringing them at a minimum to bringing them on par with their CARICOM counterparts. And we feel that if we do that, it will be a shot in the arm for the education sector. Because one, we would be able to attract a higher quality of teacher into the system. That is more people who, you know, all those people who were 20 subject and 28 subject, if we can get some of them into the education sector, it will help. So one is to attract more qualified teachers coming out of the high school system, the school system. And second is to retain what you have. Because if you are working as a teacher in Guyana for the same money that the Bahamas teacher working, you ain't gonna left your family and go to the Bahamas. You're getting the same money here. You stay with your family. So if you pay better wages, you attract more qualified people into the profession, and you retain what you have. So we believe that the resuscitation of the dysfunctional education system, the first step to resuscitating the system is to improve considerably the wages and the salaries of the teachers. First step in resuscitating the education system. Hello? Hello?
If somebody want to jump the gun. Let me help you, sir.
Hello? Hello?
Call you live. You jumped the gun, but you're live.
I almost apologize for that. I got one to make a call earlier. Now, what Dr. Hines saying is so truth. But listen to this other part of Canada they understand. They be fair. As long as the government decide to raise the wages of any public service in any area, automatically the commodities in the supermarket and the stores gone from $4 to $7. Over $7 gone to $10. You better believe what I'm saying to you. So I don't know how it's gonna happen. Because remember now, if you can't control the price control area, even if you give them money to $500,000 a month, the people in the market and the stores and the hardware stores will start seeing them from $70 or $80 and $500. We can't come saying to you. And then the quarter seeing from $500 to $700. Everything will raise 45%. You can't tell you as well. Same that guy is saying is right what he's saying. Look at the other side of the coin. Okay? And now the government have no control over the private sector and giving them that authority because listen to this and Dr. Hines. Many times they hear something like peace. or China or oil scarce. What happened within the next 2 weeks? If the market either was 400, it got to 550. If a pint of beef was 300, it got to 500. That's within a couple of weeks, a couple of days. That's because, why? It's a coordination. It's a secret plan. The thing is, so you will not pay now. We gotta raise it. You gotta bring it to them. And whoever doing the business, like if a man selling a little cattle or a man cooking a little food, whatever it is, right? He got to go and buy because customer depending on him. There's not to put this morning when you a pound salary 5,000, 4,000, whatever it is. I call it telling you one of the PPP, Magamix them telling you if it's going to pound salary. Just to show the intelligence of Guyanese is so poor. Right? They look at the long term, they look at the short term. You won't cook a pound salary. Impossible. Yeah. So we 10% now, whoever trying to say that if you buy a pound salary $5,000, you can last a week or 2 weeks to give to me. Then looking at your needs, what you need to achieve within the period of time. Okay? So, however, Mr. Clark and Dr. Hines, I have a good program. Dr. Hines, you have a good foresight. We're going to look at it at the other side of the time. Whenever they decide to raise anybody money.
Point made, caller.
Well, I would have a blessed day.
Thank you. I'm sure Dr. Hines has addressed that, but I'll give him the opportunity.
No. He raised a point. Look, what he's talking about is price gouging. Prices are determined by supply and demand, right? That if there is more demand for a good, then that affects prices, supply and demand thing. But what they call it something about is price gouging, and that is always going to be there in the system. But if people have choices, if there is only one producer or 2 or 3 producers of a particular good or a particular service, then the possibility of them raising their prices indiscriminately is very high. But if you have multiple producers and one set of producers are lowering their prices, then it will force the others to lower the prices, right? So it doesn't, the price gouging and the prices are not necessarily determined by the high wages that people earn. I think the caller is suggesting that if you raise the people's wages, they have more money, they are going to go to the market and spend more, and that is going to shoot up the prices. I don't think that is necessarily true. I don't think it's necessarily true.
Thank you, Dr. Hines. In economics, we talk of the invisible hand. And that is, prices are determined by demand and supply.
Yeah.
Right? And so, like Dr. Hines is saying, if people have choice, which is always present in the market, then we can, by ourselves as consumers, control what people sell for. Because if you have 10 persons producing as against 20 persons producing, the prices will differ. Good. We can't use the logic to say that because wages and salaries are increased, prices will increase. There are other factors.
That's what the government is saying. What they call is repeating the government thing. Right. We are not paying workers more because it's going to lead to inflation. Right?
There are other factors. There are other factors which must be taken into consideration. For example, government policies. Dr. Hines spoke earlier about the government giving quote-unquote incentives to producers. The PPP will argue that it is giving incentives to producers, but it doesn't have, as I would say, a social contract with these producers that it is giving incentives to. All right, we're going to reduce the taxes on fertilizer in exchange for what?
That's right.
In exchange for what? We are going to build farm to market roads in Hubu Bagdam. In exchange for what?
For what?
That is what is not happening. And so the government all the time through quote unquote these policies is giving to its supporters. Is giving to its supporters. Is giving to its supporters. But the citizens are getting no return for
Right,
that which is
right. It's subsidizing its supporters in sectors of the economy, especially the agricultural economy. And the citizens are not seeing the benefits from that subsidy.
Call it your life.
That is
sorry, Dr. Hines.
No, sorry. You
call it your life. Go ahead.
Thank you. A pleasant good morning to you, Kodaki, and a special good morning to Dr. Hines. Let me congratulate Dr. Hines on his elevation as the presidential candidate for his party, and I wish him and the party well. I endorse, to make a matter short and quick, I endorse everything that Dr. Hines would have expressed this morning on his with the issue, and also his viewpoint that he would have been putting over on his program. But as a presidential candidate and as a strong political activist, I want to as a person who's been around and who's extremely experienced in the climate in Guyana over the many years, I want that clients to think about let's think deeper into the reasons. I can give some reasons why public servants are not getting increase in salary, which is true. But we have to think deeper into what the other side can do. I'll speak about the union and the opposition can do to force the people. You see, the PP is stubborn in the reason. That will not change. That will not change. One thing I respect the PP party for is they have a strong and consistent propaganda machinery. And whether who like the PP or who don't like the PP, their propaganda machinery works extremely well and they get through what they want in the end. For example, the same teachers, the way this thing end up is exactly the way the people was looking for it to end.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when this strike started with teachers, it was doomed to fail from the beginning. Let me explain why. When it started in February, the first people came out and said that the strike is political. And when the people went out and said that the strike is political, the union, not the union, because the union should get involved in that, but the political parties and politicians, they went on the defensive.
Yeah.
They went on the defensive. Now, the fact that the people do not pay the public servants, the teachers, the police, and so forth is a political issue. It is political because if everything that I've explained this morning is political. It is not their people, the ethnic reasons, blah, 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 and so forth. It is political. So when the people came out and say that the strike is political, the opposition and political forces went to defense and say, no, it is not political, it's about the issue, it is union and them and blah, blah, and so forth. And they went to defense. And they failed to come out and support the union, the teachers. That's number one. They failed. They did not give they did a few wishy-washy statements, but there was no big support for the teachers during those strikes. That's number one. So the union was left to fend for themselves. There wasn't a strong support from the other side. The government was against it. If the government was against that, the opposition, you have to come out and support the union forcefully. Secondly, the other unions, which the government has already killed, because the only strong union left standing is the GTU. The GPSU and Patrican and all them, they are there. failed to come out and support the teachers, the other workers, the other public servants, right? Because of the propaganda machinery that the government continued to dispel. That was number two. So, and as this thing prolonged, and then the way the strike was called off without any proper forms of resumption. Now, when you have a strike, and maybe since then they should have suspect market and company. When you are on a strike and you're going back to work, you have to have a proper written form of resumption. They went back to work, it wasn't properly done, then they come out back, and so forth, and then they start this negotiation. Then when they were bargaining for some years that gone by, all of a sudden those years was dropped. And so forth. Now, the only time in Guyana that the workers in this country saw a substantial increase in salaries was in 1999. And why that was so? It was so because of the pressure. Same thing the people were saying there was no money. Dr. Jeffrey, who's a regular visitor on that nice program, can testify to that. He was around in the circles. The PP shout to the top of the rise, there is no money. And they brought my man in, Mr. Armstrong, R.B. Armstrong. And the next failure we have is this Judas Charandas mentality we have in this country among our people, among some of our politicians, among the youth that Mr. Lake would have just shown. The people believe in our circle. They have the Judas Charandas mentality. So if they have one or two people, they may be able to get you to simmer the struggle, if they use a term. Since those days, they tried it. Mr. Armstrong came out publicly and stated on national television, "I am not for sale," while the negotiation was taking place. He said publicly, he said, "I'm asking people to stop calling me. I am not for sale." And RB has not find money to pay the public servants 29%. And that's how the public servants were salary moved from a meager thing to something substantial. And then after that issue, the people went on a campaign to destroy the union. That's how they bring in something called the Trade Union Regulation Act, and they found this other thing, the car photo, and all this. They went on a mission to destroy the GPSU. They stopped collecting the union dues and so forth. And the GPSU and the politicians did not respond. And the GPSU died sued them. And from then to now, the people has always been on a mission to ensure that union is not strong. The only one that was left was the GTU. So, from then to now, every year, we need to stop crying on the PPP. Because the PPP is getting the way they have a mission and they don't accomplish it. What is the workers, the union, and the opposition are doing to counter that? Now, the last point I want to make, that Mr. Norton would have dealt a severe blow to people when he's saying that he's not going to protest on the road. So the PP is aware, they're aware that there will be no big counterproductive in terms of mass protests. In 1997, the Desmond told the PPP that you cannot run this country without me. You alone cannot run this country. And Desmond told him, I was going to make this country ungovernable level. He said, I will make the country ungovernable. You alone can't run this country. We all have to live in this country. We have to coexist. And when he start a mass protest, when he bring out his slogan, it ended up being the three wise men that come together to broker peace, and this will lead to the constitutional reform process. So we have the history data for sure that the only thing that the people can bring it to the table, it doesn't matter what they think about inflation, money, and debt. You got to bring it to the table. You have to pressure them to people Guyana. This is we money, this is we workers, and you need to come better than this. But so that is what I want to advise say and to say to that guys. The current dispensation that is happening will not move nobody, will not move the people. Will not move the people. Why should people so adamant about against protest? They say they're fighting, that's the only thing they're scared of. And you would take away the only weapon you have for these people respect you. And for the past, I don't know how many, they're not saying that the political officers cannot defend themselves. The people have to say that they have sent over 7,000 workers. 7,000 workers. It's 5,000 or something workers. And no opposition member is just on the offensive to defend this stupid statement about 7,000 workers. Up till Monday night, Mr. Patterson was on the that program there that they have Monday night with that
BUXTONIAN.
And that man asked Mr. Patterson a question: why haven't you start election for 5 months? And Mr. Patterson gonna defend that. Haven't never start no election for 5 months. There was one declaration, the election keep on the 2nd of March, and Jacob made one declaration until the 2nd of August. Who don't want the election, and the opposition people cannot defend that. They start election and they declare election and they take 5 months. It is Jacob take 5 months, not me. Jacob, you have to say Jacob take 5 months. Every time they said that after the election, people should be seen a court matter and $1 billion or so. They can't defend themselves. So I'm ending by saying, until the opposition people stand up to be done with all this stupid propaganda that is faking, but it does work. It may be stupid propaganda, but it's working because the opposition cannot respond to them. We have a speaker doing everything in Parliament, but they're showing this speaker tremendous respect. But all the speakers do to them, they're showing this speaker this. For example, you could do a little protest. You could make a presentation by saying the word Mr. Speaker. You could say fellow Guyanese, you could say comrades or something. You could make a presentation and don't use the term Mr. Speaker. Every Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker now, and the man is disrespecting them, not giving them no voice. So thank you, and that's my contribution.
Thank you for your call. Dr. Hines.
Great contribution. I think the caller nails it. Now let me say a couple of things. On the issue of the other unions not coming out, I think the caller himself answered that question. The unions are in such a bad state. The PSU was fearful that if they had called a solidarity strike, their workers wouldn't come out, and it would have been embarrassing. So although we are calling on the other unions, they should have come out and aided the teachers. The fear was that if they had called their workers, all the workers would come out, and it would be most embarrassing. The other unions are in no condition to give that kind of support to the teachers in terms of strike. But they could have given other support other than the strike, because they weren't sure whether they could bring out their workers on strike. And that would have been embarrassing. Now, as it relates to political party, the caller is correct. Now, I think that the political parties on the opposition side have not pivoted to bring our parties in line with the new politics. So we're adapting all the politics and all the political tactics to a changed environment. Our parties continue to be electoral machines. And in this dispensation, parties have to go beyond electoral machines. The parties have to defend their members and their supporters in a way that they didn't have to before. Because their members and supporters were not assaulted in the way that this government in this new dispensation is assaulting their supporters. And so in this new era, political parties have to extend their mandate beyond elections and to say another function of the political party is to actually defend your supporters and your community. I don't think the political parties have pivoted. That a strike under the PPP is not industrial, it's political. And so therefore, the whole conceptualization of what a strike is under this PPP, the political parties have to change. And I think, although I think our party has been different, because our party said very early, this is all strikes are political. But in general, our political parties have not pivoted to recognize that we are in the presence of a runaway dictatorial government that is prepared to beat up on citizens at all costs. And so therefore, when you are fighting a dictatorship, you don't fight a dictatorship, I agree. With all respect to Brother Aubrey, you don't fight dictatorship by saying that you don't believe you should have street protests. Once a dictator hears that, he said, I get them where I want them. I think that was a grave error by Brother Norton, but I can't speak for him. And the PNC is a big party, an experienced party, and so on. And I don't want to get into criticizing my fellow parties. And that is why I'm saying all of us, all parties, we have not pivoted to recognize what we're in the face of. You can, on the one hand, say the PPP is a dictatorship, and then say street protest is off the table. If you have a dictatorship, you have to have frontal resistance to that dictatorship. So I think it's a contradiction to say the PPP is bad. They're beating up on this. They're taking all the money. They're thieving the money. They're this, they're that. And then you say, but I ain't going on the streets. What is left to confront a dictatorship? You can't confront them in parliament. Institutionally, they have the majority, they have the speaker, so you can't confront them there. You have to confront them outside of parliament. You have to confront them on the streets. And you don't necessarily have to go breaking up things, blocking up the country, and so on. There are various forms of street protest. Various forms of street protest. I think it was a tactical mistake. It was tactically a mistake for my brother Aubrey to have taken that position. And having taken that position, it's hard now to back away from that position. The other thing is that you do not fight dictatorships as individual parties. Nowhere in the world. Nowhere in the world. In Guyana, have we fought dictatorship as individual parties? Back in the 70s, we had what was called the Committee in Defense of Democracy, that include all the opposition parties. We had the Citizens Organization that included political parties and civil society organizations. You had the 4 unions. These were the 4 radical unions: NACI, GAU, UGSA, and the CCW. And it increased to the 6 unions later on. And then it became the 7 unions, because the 2 bauxite unions and the public service union. You cannot, and I've been saying this publicly, And I've said it to Brother Aubrey. We cannot do this. We cannot continue as individual parties to confront the dictatorship. You have to have some form of broad opposition. Prior to the APNU coming in, we had what was called the JOP, the Joint Opposition Parties, AFC, WPA, PNC, even Ravi Devil, Rora, them were part of it. And it was out of the JOPP that APNU came. So it's a grave error. If we had an all-opposition party front, and all opposition means AFC, PNC, WPA, and probably some of the other small formations. But if you had that, and they were meeting once a month, they would obviously have met and said, here the teachers are striking. What should we do? The PNC would have said, well, it's a industrial relations thing we can. The WPA would have definitely said, no, we have to intervene. And the AFC might have said so. But we would have come to a compromise. And we would have had some kind of political intervention. But in the absence of an all-opposition front, the PNC takes its position. The PPP will be looking at the PNC because the PNC has muscles. And if the PNC said it's industrial, that takes the sting out of the opposition. The WPA, the PPP will say, I lock up Ogunse, lock up Kidaki, because the WPA has the potential to be volatile. And so lock them up. And once you lock them up, you instill fear in the population, but the PPP is going hard, and so on. And so the ability to mobilize is then stymied. The AFC, well, the AFC has never been a protest party. It has never been a street party. But I am confident that if we had a joint opposition, that our positions, our attitudes would have been different than when we go in, as individuals. Because the PPP is very skillful, right? It kept the PNC in the corner because the PNC said, we're not going on the street. The PPP said, thank you. The PPP propaganda is then, the WPA is the tail trying to wag the dog, which is the PNC. And it is warning the PNC, be careful of those volatile people. They are revolutionaries. They're going to cause trouble and get you in trouble. And what the PPP has successfully been able to do is to drive a wedge in between the opposition parties and prevent us from having a united front. Look at what we're doing. Elections are a year or less away. And each party, each of the three parties is still doing its own thing. Now, nothing is wrong with that. Nothing is wrong with the AFC building its party, rebuilding its party. Nothing is wrong with the WPA rebuilding its party. Nothing is wrong with the PNC rebuilding its party. All three parties.
Morning, neighbor, morning, are you morning, morning, Mr. Morning. Welcome to another program of Guyanese Morning Time. I am your host, Kidaki Amsterdam. It is 7 hours 42. That is 18 minutes to the 8 o'clock hour on the 29th day of August in the year 2024. Welcome to the program. I usually say I'm not late. I'm always deliberate. And I think yesterday's conversation is one worthy of having you listen to again, at least to the greater part. Of course, I can't do the entire program, or I don't ever do an entire program or replay. And so that is why yes, sir. Yeah, in the trunk. Yes. So I always come to talk to you because we have to talk. Right. It's Thursdays. It's Thursday. It's karaoke day at Club Twilight. Number one. Number two, we're expecting possibly it's when Mr. Winston Jordan comes on. I don't know if he's available this morning, but we're communicating. Right. So let's talk a few things. I see somebody say WPA is the opposition. Why not organize the protests? Well, let me throw it up so you can see it for yourself. WPA is in the opposition. Why Dr. Hines is not mobilizing the people to confront the government by protesting? I think that question has been asked and answered. Right? That question has been asked and answered. And so my response to it is, as I would like to say, everybody must know their capacity. We must recognize our limitations. And the limitations I'm going to talk about here are not necessarily WPA's limitations, but limitations that people impose on themselves. You see, everybody is talking, WPA is out there leading for the last 4 years. I beg those of you who might be naysayers to disagree with me that WPA has been out there leading for the last 4 years. But have the people followed WPA in the numbers that are necessary and important to impact and result in the changes that we are talking about, these big changes that we need? A clean voters list, biometrics, better livable wages, and so on. I will sit here and I will say no. And it's not a failure on the part of the WPA. It is a failure on the part of the people because they keep asking for leadership. The WPA is offering leadership, but they're not taking the leadership. They're looking to Aubrey Norton. They're looking to the PNC in particular for leadership. Why? It's the mentality, the psyche of people that, hey, the PNC is the bigger political party or the biggest political party in the opposition. And so we should follow the biggest political party in the opposition. There's those who will think outside of the box and say, hey, WPA is a party to follow because WPA is offering leadership. But from where I sit, that is what I'm saying. The majority of people are waiting for the PNC to offer the kind of leadership that WPA is offering before they react. Don't ask why the WPA is not mobilizing the people to confront the government. Ask why the people are not getting in line behind the WPA. Anyways, I said it's Thursday. We have Winston Jordan. This conversation is likely to be continued. Let me get Mr. Jordan. He's going to be on for a short time. I don't know what constitutes a short time because I know where he is. And when he gets into the flow, that is it. Right? Unless somebody going to over his shoulder and say, hey, Winston, remember you promised to take me to wherever today. Mr. Jordan, good morning. Welcome to the program. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. You know, as I said, sometimes when you get the opportunity that you can be out to the meadows, you know, you tend to see what is going on in real time and in reality. You know, so as I said the last time, every opportunity I get to come out to the meadows, I try to do it just to maintain the sanity.
I don't blame you, partner. I don't blame you at all. I don't blame you.
We had a very spirited discussion last night among a lot of Guyanese, but I wouldn't want it's. I wake up this morning feeling like I went 15 rounds with Joe Fraser. The guys were very, very animated about what is happening here.
15 rounds with a black bomber by? There's blows.
Yes. So you could imagine wake up this morning bruised, but not knocked out. You know, I listened yesterday, as you know, I have to respond because somebody thought that I was speaking.
Yes, I recognize that.
Yes, but that guy was making some extremely valid points. And the general discussion yesterday was extremely spirited and well-intentioned, highly knowledgeable, and so on. And I'm hoping to continue it this morning by having a look again at this teachers' strike. And if I get the time, we'll look at that issue again about prices and wages and so on, because in the discussion that took place yesterday, some things that I had said already on this program at least 2 or 3 times were brought up. Of course, I don't think people recall them, but I guess we have to keep repeating them over and over, because I had the same issues last night with people saying they're hearing this for the first time and all kinds of things. And I reference them to all different places that they can go and pick up that information. So sometimes...
Yeah, Mr. Jordan, sorry. The problem I find in this society is a lot of people prefer second-hand information. We don't read, we don't research. We rather hear what somebody said. And if we didn't hear somebody say, we didn't hear it.
Exactly. And at times they cling on so long to these hearsay that when you're now trying to correct them or point them to the original source of information and so on, it's hard to believe. You know, it's hard to believe. And I swear that as soon as you left, they probably just mouthing the same foolishness that they were accustomed to. But it's a work in progress. Yeah? Education has never been easy.
Sure.
You know. So I want to give a little bit of a quick background of this teachers' strike. I don't know how many people recall that in 1999 was a hotbed of strikes and arbitration, because most people do remember the Armstrong arbitration. But the Armstrong arbitration was preceded by the teachers' arbitration, right? In fact, because I presented the government's case at the teachers' arbitration and at the Armstrong arbitration. The teachers' arbitration in 1999 was chaired by Father Malcolm Rodriguez. And it included members Norman Semple, who appeared on behalf of the teachers, who was picked by the teachers, and of course Gobind Gango, that name, Gobind Gango, who was picked by the government. And the teachers' case was presented by Donald Robinson, right, the well-known lawyer, Donald Robinson, right? The arbitration took place in May of 1999, right? And it stemmed from a disagreement again over wages and other conditions, but particularly wages. Teachers had been offered a 4.6% across the board increase, which was the same increase that was being offered to the public servants, and which generally was consistent with what government was known to be giving, a 5% here, 3% there, and so on. So I think this time around the teachers would have none of it. And eventually they agreed to arbitration. Jeffrey, I think, was the minister in those days. They agreed to arbitration. Now, if I recall clearly, there was something about one arbitration, because both the public servants and the teachers had rejected the 4.6%. But the teachers decided that they will go alone. They will have their own way and their own arbitration. Hence the Malcolm Rodriguez arbitration. In the end, the Rodriguez arbitration awarded 10% increase for the scales TS1 to TS5, and 12% increase for the scales TS6 to TS19. And these increases were made retroactive to the 4th of January 1999. In the eyes of the government, even though it meant a doubling of the offer that they had made to the teachers, in the eyes of the government, it was a win, because, compared to what the teachers were asking for, and compared to what the Malcolm Rodriguez arbitration gave them, in the eyes of the government, it was a win. And it also, at that same time, set the stage for the upcoming arbitration between the public servants, right, and the government. You understand? The public servants, as people well know, the public service arbitration was headed by Aubrey Armstrong, Dr. Aubrey Armstrong, who was the chairman, and Clive Thomas, who was nominated by the public service, And again, Gobin Gango, who was nominated by the government. I presented again for the government, and Patrick Yard and others presented for the union. And the background to that public service strike included also the fact that there was a North Sea strike in 1991. There was a general one-day strike in 1992. There was an 11-day strike in 1994. The government and all of these now, these antecedents was compounded by the fact of the 4.6% across the board increase that the government had offered in 1999 compared to the GPSU's request for 40% increase for 1999 and 50% for 2000. So, of course, no agreement could be reached, and a strike. I think the strike. I think some of the comments that came out of people like Jack Dio at the time infuriated, incensed the unions, and they went on strike. And as we know, that strike lasted for 57 days. It started April the 30th, 1999, lasted for 57 days. And even its ending was in a bit of a fiasco. All right. In fact, Mr. Yard, as the union head, apparently had to get security because of the way that strike was ended. So the way this other strike and arbitration signing for the teachers reminded me of that particular event of Mr. Yard having to have some form of security, whether it was the official security of the government or his own security, because people were incensed with the way the strike had ended. I think on reflection, in Stabric News of the 11th of February 2010, Yard quoted as saying that he had no regrets about the strike. And I think I agree with, he felt in many things could have been done differently. And this is where I'm using all this as background as to why the GTU, I felt, never learned the history and understood these strikes, arbitration, and so on, and what were the lessons to be learned from them, and how they could have incorporated their lessons into the present situation that they had. And he felt one of the things that could have been done differently was that the union could have used the word wrangle tighter agreements with the government. When you look at this agreement that the GTU has concluded with the government, even Correcting McDonald has been on record as saying that there are a number of loose things there, whether it's interpretation or otherwise. So again, as I said, they never really learned from their own history with arbitration and dealing with the government and the public service. So he said the union could have wrangled tighter agreements with the government. He felt, and this was a very important one, that more emphasis on synchronizing with the general membership, more emphasis on synchronizing with the general membership. Let me quote him here. He says, quote, "There were good members committed to the struggle, but there was lots of mischief playing out within the ranks of the membership, and we should have treated with it more effectively." Close to exactly what emerged, apparently what emerged out of this GTU fiasco, as if you want to call it, in Brockville, if you want to call it, so on. That rather than going back to the general membership, who had clearly expressed what they wanted and what they were prepared to accept, they went to a general council, which appeared to have been divided one way or the other. And in fact, even at the general council, there was no unanimity. According to what is in the public records, there were 17 who voted for, 5 who voted against, and 5 who sat on the fence. who abstain. I don't know in a matter of such import that has to do with wages and salary and other things for teachers that you ask people who are abstaining, when it comes to vote, abstaining. But anyway, but that is what is in the public record. The third point that Yara had made in that reflection that he was doing was that he considered that the final agreement had deficiencies. He said, quote, "I should have dotted the I's and crossed the T's." Again, this sounds like shades of what that would be 25 years afterwards seemed to have been the same problem with this agreement that was concluded with the GTU and the teachers. But nevertheless, the union, the Public Service Union, was able to get from the arbitration, the Armstrong arbitration, toward 1.6% for 1999 and a 26.6% increase for 2000. Unheard of increases, and unfortunately, rather prophetic words, I think, by a lot of observers, seem to have been the last of the real increases that were given to the unions. Now, what do you think happened here with the teachers? The teachers were forever, despondent, because remember they had only got 10 and 12%. Now you have public servants getting 31.6% and 26.6%. And there was no agreement that they will get any difference should the Armstrong arbitration award higher salaries than what they got in the Rodriguez arbitration. So, of course, you could understand now the despondency among the teachers themselves, and I think that might have hastened the exodus of teachers during that period, because a significant number of teachers left post 1999, all right? And there was obviously that gap between their salaries, between public servants and teachers. And of course, they didn't get what they wanted. Salaries remained depressed. And they sought avenues in the CARICOM territories and continued to run to Botswana and the United States in every which way that they could get a decent income consistent with their qualifications and experience. But after that, the government, and as was said yesterday by a caller, the government ensured that never again that they would go to an arbitration, and that never again would unions be in a position to blindside them with strikes of that lengthy nature, to blindside them with arbitrations that would award these large increases, and so forth. So the GPUSU suffered tremendously there afterwards. Here are some of the things that the government did. The first thing that the government did was to stop the checkoff system, identical to what they did to the GTU. For those who don't know, the checkoff system is an agreement that the unions have with the government to deduct from members after those members would have signed a slip or whatever, given permission to deduct the union dues from their salary, and to remit those dues to the unions. Now, can you imagine now, if that system is stopped, then the lifeblood of the unions, which is the union dues, will come under severe stress. And this is what happened to the GTU. Nobody can tell me, you or any sane person, that what the union, the GTU was happening, they were suffering from a severe financial stress occasioned by the absence of the checkoff system. Because if you got 7,000 workers, you figure 7,000 workers will be walking into you every month to contribute to your dues? Not going to happen. not going to happen. And when the checkoff system was stopped with the GPSU, their finances plummeted. They had already invested significant financial resources in the arbitration because they had employed a lot of advisors, and researchers and all kinds of people. They had to meet their share of the arbitration costs. I think half met by the union, half met by the government, and so on. So those would have put a serious dent into the coffers of the GPSU. All right? Now, and then to have the checkoff system stop, which now they have to send around people to collect the money, or have people walk in voluntarily to pay the dues. Not much would have come of it. And then the government got won a court case in which the agency shop also stopped. The agency shop is different from the checkoff system. The agency shop is designed to confront what is called the free rider problem. The free rider problem, in essence, is one where non-unionized members get the same benefit of unionized members. All right? So if the unions negotiate a wage increase for their union members, the non-union members also get that wage increase. So that's hence the free rider problem. They're getting a benefit without actually paying anything for it. So the agency shop that I think was instituted on the Bonham administration, if I can recall. I may be wrong, but I rather suspect that Polydor was able to convince Bonham about the agency shop. Was one where non-union members will have to pay the same union dues as union members without getting the benefits of a union member. All right, so those union members can benefit from representation. If anything go wrong, they can get training by the unions and whatnot. The non-union member, even though paying the same equipment that union dues to the union, will not have access to those. So the government got a court decision in their favor that stopped the agency shop. So two main sources of income of the GPSU were gone, just like that, were gone. The government then proceeded to remove those rebel agencies, as they might have been termed. In other words, then those agencies that kept the strike going for 57 days, they proceeded to remove every one of them out of the traditional public service and made them into semi-agencies or public corporations. Hence, agencies like GRA, Ghana Revenue Authority, that comprise of all customs and excise and all inland revenue. Those two agencies were within the traditional public service, and people could not be dismissed on a whim and a prayer, right? They came under the Public Service Commission. Now under GRA, they come under the board of the GRA. The board is appointed by the government, and everything else, as you know, will follow. The Lands and Surveys Commission was made into the Ghana Lands and Surveys Commission. Land and Surveys Department, not Commission. The Lands and Surveys Department, which was an institution in the public service, was taken out of the public service and made into the Ghana Lands and Surveys Commission, which is a semi-autonomous agency now with its own act and again with its own board. The Georgetown Hospital, which carried a strike, the whole issue with the nurses. The nurses have always been militant and so on. And they were a big part of the strike, and the reason why the strike lasted so long. They were taken out of the traditional public service and formed into the Georgetown Public Hospital Corporation. All right, so they were just easily put under the Public Corporations Act and pulled out of the general public service. The deeds registry, again, also that was very instrumental in keeping the strike going. They were pulled out and made into a semi-autonomous agency, right? So those were among some of the wicked things that had taken place. Patrick, the GPSU, even in these new institutions where the GPSU would have been, the union, the recognized union. I know particularly in the case of the GRA, they were denied recognition, even though they were the recognized union when they were the land revenue and customs the next time. They were denied recognition for a very long time. They were only given recognition and the papers signed during the coalition administration. You know, some people find it hard to believe, but they were only given that recognition and the agreement signed with them under the coalition. So that is the tell. And there are a number of other things that the government did to cripple the Ghana Public Service Union. So when you hear people saying the GPS didn't come out and support the teachers, and you were right. I mean, Dr. Hines was right. Callers were right. GPS was in no position to support any strike. They are in no position to call any strike, and they are in no position to support any strike. I don't know if they have cut back the check-off system with the government, but even if they got it, they will be in a very precarious position of losing it were they to support any strike. In that same 57-day strike, while there might have been tacit support, the only union that gave more than tacit support was the Postal and Telecommunications Workers Union. And their postal girls and so on and so forth, they joined the strike and so on. You know, and you know, I asked the question and I put it out there. If somebody has an answer, they can put it on your team. Whenever did the GTU, Ghana Teachers Union, give tangible support to a strike by the public servants? If people have the answers to that, then I'll be happy to know. But I don't recall in my memory bank ever that the teachers, Ghana Teachers Union, given tangible, not tacit, tangible support to the public servants. I'm not saying it's a basis on which the public servants should reciprocate, but I'm just saying people beat up on the other unions for not giving support to the teachers union, when in fact the reciprocity is not known or is not on the record. The other thing that why the public service GPS who figured that they weren't in a position to really help out is what Yard said in that same interview. He said, quote, "The union found itself standing alone to defend workers' rights." He said members started to feel that they were being used and so were no longer prepared to make those kinds of sacrifices. You understand what he's saying there? He's literally saying that, look, while they are carrying the torch and the burden and so forth, and others are benefiting, they're the ones who are paying for those sacrifices, and others are not joining their struggle. So with that kind of mindset, it will be very hard, for GPSU to be able to call a strike in the future. And it will be very hard to get the kind of union solidarity that you got in the 80s against the PNC governments. It will be very hard for that. And I'm predicting to you that it will be very hard for the Ghana Trades Union, the teachers union, to call a strike down the road that will match the 75 days or anywhere near the 75 days that they did in this strike, because the way how that strike ended and the feelings that half or more than half of their membership have, it will be difficult for them to come out in any future thing about saying the striking for better benefit. And this is a blow that those who have signed this agreement don't seem to understand. It's a blow that will hurt the union down the road. And it's a blow that ultimately may hurt its membership, because people may feel that, look, whether I pay my union dues or not, I can end up getting the same thing that the government giving me. because the union is powerless. The union appears powerless to bargain for quality wages and salaries for me. I think the GTU, as I said, didn't put together the history of these negotiation arbitration, and might not, because I don't know their structure, but might not have gone into these negotiations with what is called minimax position. There's a minimum that you're prepared to accept, right? And there's a maximum that you're prepared to give up. I didn't sense that there was any overriding strategy to the negotiations. And let me tell you right here. You went out on strike. You went out on strike claiming that you were striking for collective bargaining, that there was no collective bargaining, that these things were being imposed on you. Fine. Then you get court decisions in your favor and so on. The people say, we can come on collective bargaining. Then you put on the table that you want this thing go back from 2019 because the last negotiated agreement ended at 2018. You want this thing to go back from 2019 and come forward. So we must start force about 2019 to 2023 or whatever it is, and then 24 take the next thing. And you had that as part of your mantra even as you did the strike. When you went back to the collective bargaining, suddenly you gave up 2019, the back years. You gave up the back years without getting a single thing in return for it. You gave it up. So it says to me that you didn't really believe in it. It says to the public that you didn't really believe in it. You just threw it in there as a red herring. Who does that in a negotiation? Give up those positions for nothing? Then you had these different 35, 40, 25, whatever were your bargaining for the wage increases. That suggested to the public that you had a careful computation. You had a careful computation of where the salaries should be. And where these salaries should be was consistent with some set of criteria. Maybe salaries for similar positions in the public service, salaries for similar positions in the private sector, salaries for similar positions in the Caribbean, average salaries in the Caribbean, or something, some set of criteria you got. You never made those public, but you said you were asking for 35%, 30%, and 25%. Now, if you believe in those numbers, then you have to go there in the negotiations and represent those numbers. And that is what I believe. I'm saying, because they didn't put out much outside it, I'm saying that based on what is put in the press and what I heard, they never represented those numbers. And to represent those numbers means you have all your calculations, you have all your spreadsheets, you have all your historical, you have all your trend analysis, and most of all, you are being backed up by 1, 2, or 3 professional people who are giving you the critical support and advice. I didn't see that at all in the approach to the negotiations. No, is 35 your maximum position? Is 35 your minimum position? If 35 is your maximum position, is 10 your minimum position? I doubt whether 10 was your minimum position. What was your minimum position? If 35 were your maximum position, what was your minimum position? And if 35 was your minimum position, why did you deviate from your minimum position when you got nothing else? Why did you deviate? In fact, in this whole thing, the unions came out with absolutely nothing new. They came out worse off than when they went in, including the sympathy of the public. they came out worse off. They kept vacillating, they kept changing their positions while they were getting nothing from the government. Who does that in any negotiation? No one does that in any negotiation. If the talks broke down, the next aspect was arbitration. That is what they tried in 2018. When the talks initially broke down, it was generally agreed that the arbitration was the next way to go. And while they were trying to name and identify people for arbitration in 2018, an agreement was brokered. Hence, no need for the arbitration in 2018. Why was the union afraid to go to arbitration if they did not get what they wanted? Why? They were in the best position to agree to the arbitration. Why did they not go to arbitration? Why they haste to sign an agreement that was detrimental to them in the short, medium, and long term? Why were they talking about other benefits? Listen, this other benefit story, I mean, we look at some of the benefits, they are so
embarrassing.
They're so inconsequential. And they're so lopsided. In other words, and they are skewed to those at the top. How many people, man, when you got a PhD, you don't teach? Not in Guyana. Yes, overseas, lots of people got PhD and they're teachers. When you got a PhD in Guyana, you don't teach in a secondary school or a primary school. So who is really going to be benefited from this $20,000 extra when you got a PhD? And how many people in Guyana got master's degree and they are teaching? Most of the time when people acquire their master's degree, they're going and teach at UG, or they're going into the private sector, or they're going into some aspect of the public sector, or they migrate and so on. How many teachers with master's degree are actually teaching, not at NSWORD or one of these places, who are actually teaching? How many? So these are inconsequential so-called other benefits. Inconsequential. And if an allowance is tied to your salary, it's taxable. So and what is worse, it's taxable and it doesn't count for the determination of pension and gratuity. It doesn't count in the determination of your vacation allowance at the end of the year. So what they're going around hollering, telling people about look at the other benefits. What other benefits? There are no other benefits of consequence in that agreement. Certainly not to the average teacher or the bulk of the teachers who are earning less than $200,000 per month. So where is where is the soundness of this agreement that you signed? Where is the soundness of it? Jaguar runs out at the press conference last week, Thursday. And as reported, I call them the malignant monologues. I don't call it press conference no more. I call it the malignant monologues. As reported by the DPI last week, this is some of the summary things that he said. He said the coalition government had never increased teachers' salary by greater than 10%. I don't know whether if that is a criticism or just a statement of fact. Because if it's a criticism, it pales into insignificance. Totally pales into significance. What is the issue about whether it was increased by 10%, 50, or so on, in the context of the resources that we had at the time? But then he didn't mention. He chose these things out there and allowed the press to report it as if A, is gospel, and B, it was it has some implication, negative implication about it. We may not have paid salaries greater than 10%, but we broke the cycle of the across-the-board 5% increase that they were giving to people and that they gave to the teachers. Check the agreement. Check the agreement that I think ended in 2016 or 2015 that we inherited from the teachers. The agreement says that in the 5-year period, teachers will get 5% across the board and 1% of their annual wage bill for incentive or whatever the case may be. They were known as the 5% government. We broke that cycle when we came into power in May 2015. So I don't know what is the criticism that you're hoping that we never gave greater than 10%. We might not have given greater than 10%, but we doubled what they were accustomed to be given, which was 5%. Then he said in 2015, the APNU government had never given a salary increase to the teachers, only a one-off cash bonus. But the teachers already had an agreement that they had signed with the PPP government that ended in 2016. They already had an agreement. And contrary to what he's saying, everybody knows that the coalition government increased the minimum wage from $39,000, $580 or $570 to $50,000 in one shot. And a minimum wage, a government minimum wage says exactly what it is. It must be the minimum paid by the government sector to everybody. And teachers part of the government sector. Like that.
Certainly they are.
So if the government has a new minimum wage, moving the minimum wage from 49,000 to 50,000, and the teachers going to be benefit, notwithstanding the fact that they got an existing agreement with the people that was signed under the PPP government. But you see, this is the level of asininity that you've got to deal with, and you have to waste precious time to rebut in public. And something that the reporters will report, this is it, full stop. They don't even put a little note well or PS or whatever they want to put, or editor's note, nothing. It just reported and left there. Even though the people know better. And then at that point, he reminded that the APNU plus AFC government had increased ministers' salaries by 50%. Of course, the mantra will never die, right? And we have debunked that up to 2 weeks ago on the same program. And we have reconfirmed the fact that Mr. Jagdeo got 50% increase because as opposition leader, he got the same salary as a senior minister. And soon I will bring to the public's attention again all the machinations that took place in the 90s that led to the changes in his salary as president, the changes in his pension, the changes in the benefits, and so on. And to show you how this is an animal farm, where some are better or appear to be better or tell themselves that they are better than others. While we are struggling here on an NIS pension that has not increased since 2019, Mr. Jagdeo gets a pension that is 7/8 of the current salary of the current president. So every time the salary of the current president is increased, his pension is automatically increased. We NIS pensioners have 5 years now, have not got a single cent increase. Those who are above the minimum pension, not a single cent. But this is animal farm. Some are better than others. Those who have even more than others will get even more. And then, of course, he drew the last point, he drew attention to teachers' wage bill in 2015 being $14.9 billion. compared to the wage bill of today of $40 billion. That's before the 10% increase in salary that will carry to $44 billion. Right? And claim that how 10% of a $15 billion wage bill in 2015 would only have meant $1.5 billion. Whereas 10% of a $4 billion wage bill, of a $40 billion wage bill today would meant $4 billion. My friend Kadaki, if you had made that kind of analysis while I was teaching at UG, I would have whispered in your ears to please leave the class. That this course wasn't for you. It was some you may have talent, but not for this course. You know, I mean, you making this kind of comparison, I would have quietly tell you, I won't embarrass you in class. I would tell you, look, Kadaki, look, this is not your this is not your forte. Find another course. But let me tell you something. Let's use his figures. Okay? 14.9 billion was the teacher's wage bill, he says, in 2015. I don't know, I haven't looked at the figures, but I can use his figure. You know what was the budget in 2015? The budget in 2015 was $221 billion. $221 billion. When you divide 14.9 by 221, you get 6.7%. In other words, then, teachers were getting 6.7% of the budget in 2015. Keep the figure in mind. Teachers were getting 6.7% of the budget in 2015. We come to 2024. The budget is, the teachers' bill is 40. Then we add in the increase of 4 billion, 10%. So teachers' bill is 44 billion. The size of the budget in 2024 is $1.146 trillion without adding the 40 billion that they took recently as supplemental. We just don't go with what was in the budget. When you divide 44 billion by 1.146 trillion, you get 3.8%. So teachers' share of the budget had declined drastically by nearly 50%, or from 6.7% in 2015 to 3.8% in 2024. So who's the monkey and who's the jackass? It will take a 90% increase, a 93.3% increase in the teacher's wage bill to move the slice of the teacher's salary back to 6.7% of the wage bill. 93.3% increase in salaries. And had these kinds of representations been made to the government by the teachers union and to the public, it would have been part of the explanation why they were asking for 35, 30, and 20%. That they were trying to get back in the first place the share that they commanded in 2015, the share of the budget that they commanded in 2015. That would be part of their explanation. Plausible explanation, and one that the government could, the public could have readily accepted. It is part of the argument that they could have made to any arbitration tribunal. Any arbitration tribunal that would have drawn the serious attention of the arbitrators. So they were within their rights to act to 25% because they lost significant share in the total budget. When he comes and how we pay more than 10%, with no resources, no oil resources, no anything, teachers were getting 6.7% of the budget in 2015. And their share has dropped significantly in 2014 by almost half. They're now down to 3.8%, even with a 10% increase in 2040. And their share will drop further and further over the next two years when they are given only 8% and 9%. Their share will drop even further. These are matters that the GTU could have been expressing in public, and it could have been forcing the arbitration so the arbitrators understood these facts. And when they come with this nonsense about fiscal space, it is only fancy words to confuse the public. It is only fancy words to confuse the public. Fiscal space is about priority. First and foremost, about priority. You could go block all the fiscal space if you engage in all these construction jobs that and breaking up biscuit roads and bridge across Borbis River and bridge here and bridge there and all these kinds of things. All of that could be eating up your fiscal space. With a simple rearrangement of your program and reprioritization of the program, fiscal space is freed up. And I'll be the first to admit and agree that wages and salaries must be paid from taxes, from tax collection. Indeed, you must treat your natural resource fund as a godsend, a windfall. Wages and salaries must be paid from tax collection and tax revenue. But you go and look at the budget. From the time the government came in, they were rewarding their supporters and private sector people with tax giveaways, tax concession, subsidies, all these things. All these things reduce tax collection and tax revenue. And hence your fiscal space. Why are you penalizing teachers for your inept management of the economy? That is what it is. Now they are in a jam. They are in a bind. They have concerns about tax revenue and revenue collection. And they have to go to this poor public policy of retroactive taxation, where they brought in a regulation that has gone back to September to tax migrants' cars, that they were unfairly levying 30% when the law had said 10%. And instead of putting any legislation going forward, they put it going back. And that tells me that they are in such a bind in tax collection, because we haven't seen the half-year report. They are in such a bind with tax collection that they can't afford to lose the couple $1 million that would have been implied were they to give back to the migrants as indicated to the Chief Justice. So when you give away all the tax, when you subsidize, all of these different places to subsidize in, massive subsidies to GWI, massive subsidies to Ghana Power and Light, massive subsidies to all these other electrification companies, massive giveaway of concession to this sector, to that sector, to the tariff sector, massive giveaways in so-called fertilizer subsidies, in so-called cash handouts to this one and so on. All of these things, they imply less revenue. They imply less availability of cash. These are matters that the union could have rightfully brought up. It is not their concern. They use these arguments about fiscal space again when they went to the arbitration of Armstrong, when they went to the arbitration of Rodriguez, and every which way but loose. And every time it was found, when these awards were made, that the so-called fiscal space suddenly weren't there anymore. They paid the 31.06%, 0.6%, and they paid the 26.6%. But the fiscal space argument that they were making suddenly disappeared. Then they talked about, oh, if we pay these big thing, inflation will rise. Right? Inflation will rise. When the arbitration, in Armstrong arbitration was paid in 1999, in 1998, the inflation rate was 4.59%. When the Armstrong arbitration award of 41.6% was paid in 1999, the inflation went up to 7.54%. A slight increase. And when the 26.6% was paid in 2000, the inflation rate declined from 7.54% the previous year to 6.15% in 2000. And after 2000, the inflation rate moderated significantly, such that in 2001, the inflation rate was 2.63%, a third of what it was the previous year. And so all the bleatings about, oh, if you pay more money and so on, if you think, oh, you pay the rate will go up, the big thing, is not borne out by the statistics. Let us look at our own situation in the 2015 to 2020 period. Let's look. Everybody knows we paid some of the highest wage increases during that period. Significantly high wage increases. And what did they do to inflation? In 2015, we had a deflation, which is the opposite of inflation. Instead of having an increase, we had a decrease of 1%. In 2016, the inflation rate was 0.84%. So it's not even 1%. It was 0.84%. In 2017, it was 1.9%. In 2018, it was 1.28%. In 2019, it was 2.09%. And in 2020, it was 0.99%. Nailing the lie that if you pay these increases, you're going to have these fantastic increases in inflation. But wait a minute. Everybody knows that the cost of living is extremely high. Everybody knows the cost of living is extremely high. And what is really the cost of living? A quick definition of cost of living is the amount of money needed to cover basic expenses such as housing, food, taxes, healthcare, all these different things, right? In a certain place, and in a certain time period. And it's, of course, it's used to compare expenses across areas and so on, right? So the cost of living in Georgetown may not be the cost of living in Newport, may not be the cost of living in Cameron, or may not be the cost of living in Linden, right? And that's why you put together what is called a cost of living index, right? And very often in places, you look at the cost of living index to determine whether you want to go there and live there and so on. Certainly in the big countries, I don't know that happens in Guyana. Okay? But last year, you of course, you have also inflation, right? Which is really the changes in prices over a certain period. But according to the government, so if you have high inflation, you will expect high cost of living, all right, and severe and heavy demand for increases in salaries to at least approximate what cost of living you had before. So you would hear about, so how do you get high cost of living in a situation of so-called low inflation? The government own data says last year that the inflation rate was roughly 2.82%. But yet still you have persistently high inflation. cost of living, such that it will not make a dent in your standard of living if your salary were to go up by 2.82%. How can cost of living be so high and inflation be so low? The maths in. And that is why something is wrong with the calculation of inflation in Guyana. Something is wrong. I'm not saying the guys are cheating or anything like that, but something might be wrong in terms of the way they're going about it. Something might be wrong about the basket, the composition of the goods in the basket. Something might be wrong with the weights attached to the goods in the basket and so on. Something needs to be done because you're looking like a clown. When you're saying inflation is 2.82%, but the cost of living is through the stratosphere. It's the two can't be right. You can't have a very low inflation and a very high cost of living, because the inflation feeds into the cost of living. So something's drastically and dramatically wrong. You compare now our 5 years, when we had these high salary increases and these low inflation, you didn't hear anybody complain about cost of living. Did you hear anybody complain about cost of living in them 5 years?
No, sir.
Did you hear anybody complain about they couldn't eat? Did you hear anybody complain about pumpkin being $1,000? Yeah? Did you hear anybody complain about rentals being for a one-bedroom place in a forsaken place being what? Did you hear about poverty being 50% or nearly 50%? People going without food for days? Did you hear all these things? But here you having people trying to let you believe that inflation is 2.82%, but the cost of living is in the stratosphere. And as I said yesterday, you recall a number of things that points that I already made as related to prices. Only thing, none more than the social contract. You recall I was the first one to raise the issue with social contract on your program. When I said to you that Motley is obviously listening to you, because she had entered into a social contract with her people in exchange for certain concessions. And I had argued consistently that unless you enter into a social contract with these people who you are giving the concession, all you merely do is transform resources from the treasury to these people. That's what you're doing. You don't tell me what you're going to give a farmer $900 million in fertilizer and shake your hand and smile and then walk away. What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? And people like talk about market being buyers and sellers and free market. We don't have no free market in Guyana. You do not have a free market in Guyana. To get a free market, you have to have a large number of buyers and sellers. What you have in Guyana, you may have a large number of buyers, but few sellers. Few sellers. And because of that, you got prices could go through the roof. And you might cost the Chinese shop and so on, but they are helping to depress prices by selling cheaper. I don't know how they do it. I don't know if it's fair competition they're giving or whatnot. That is still to be investigated. But I'm saying their presence have depressed prices somewhat from what they would potentially be. And when you consider that government is pouring in money into GPL, GWI, these places, just to keep, and fuel and all these things, just to keep those prices low. Can you imagine what the cost of living might have been if you had removed all those subsidies and so on? Can you imagine? But what the government don't seem to answer is what they are doing is not working. It is not working. And they're relying on all economic theory to suppress wages without understanding if you suppress wages, how you going to create the level of demand that will spur suppliers to supply. How are you going to create the level of demand to spur suppliers to supply? And when you go and you come in and you destroy the program that we had in place for places like Buxton and Moko and so on, the agricultural program, you destroy those. How are you going to get simple foods that the people are accustomed to planting and edo and cassava and so on? How they are going to get simple things like fruits, mangoes and bananas and whatever else we are accustomed to? How are they going to get those? Because even if people are willing to go back to the land, they're not getting the support. But it's easy for you to import all these kinds of story. And it's easy for you to close off markets, allowing people to benefit significantly. Look how much money they're pouring into some feed for chicken. Yet till you got severe chicken shortage. And you have smuggling in which you turn your blind eye. Look at the quality of the sugar. You're pouring money into Gaisuko, whereas you could get sugar at significantly less than Gaisuko is producing it, and you could use the resources that are freed up that would have gone to Gaisuko in a different area or even in that same area to do other agricultural products and so on. What kind of is inept management, Kadaki? Totally inept management. So Kodaki, I just going to leave you with that bit this morning. I think, as I said, I believe the teachers have really been given a radio. I believe, unfortunately, this might be the last of the strikes you will see from the teachers, that any attempt by GTU to call strikes in the future will not be met with the same enthusiasm. I believe you will see a further exodus in the teaching profession, which will be a grave concern to us, especially at the time when you have some of the most horrendous CXC results in terms of where they are trending, particularly maths and English. Can you imagine less than 5% of people writing the CXC exam getting 5 subjects with maths and English? My goodness, it's hard to take in that kind of statistic. Hard, very hard to take in that kind of statistic. But that is the reality. And if we don't have in place the nutrients for the children at the very early age, if we don't have the teachers in the classroom qualified, exuberant, experienced, with a smile on their face, not only in Georgetown, but in Letem, in Cameron, in Linden, Kokwani, and these places. But instead, we're doing everything to chase them out, thinking that we could bring in others from overseas to fill the gaps that they will be created. I think this must be the most backward set of management. But it's unfortunate in a country again that is racked by so much ethnicity and racism and discrimination and so on, with so much money in place, that we have to be the beneficiaries of this poverty, so to speak. But we got to keep speaking and we got to keep talking, and we have to call for action, and we hope we can get some action in the direction where we can have less wastage and more direct interventions that will cure some of the ills that I've identified. Just using data, not politics, just using data. But teachers, you have lots of sympathy, but we have to move beyond sympathy. Sympathy don't put bread on the table. And sympathy can move you to the next level. All right? You have to continue your actions for a betterment. The public at large sympathize with you, but you need strong representation. You need better representation, right? With the present representation that you got, you're not likely to get. Your situation is not likely to improve. Over and out.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan, for yet another sterling contribution to these discourses. Have a good day. Well, you've heard former Minister of Finance Winston Jordan, and you've heard him. I don't have anything to add, neither subtract, neither take away. The only thing I add in is the cash app. $ KAMSTV. I'll put your dollar there, man. It's 8 minutes to the 9 o'clock hour. Yesterday I wasn't able to play your voice notes. Today again, I guess I wouldn't be playing those voice notes. So tomorrow, Free Talk Friday, I promise you, you're gonna run the show. Right? You will run the show tomorrow, Free Talk Friday.
Do you want to know what happened in 1763 during the Berbice Revolution? On Saturday, August 31st, you can come and hear Professor Marjolaine Carrs, author of the book Blood on the River. This is your opportunity to learn what really happened hundreds of years ago, and you will hear it from the voices of those who were there. This is the first in the series of Ipadaji talks on issues relevant to our people. Call 223-8852 to 3 to reserve your seat. Ipadaji Talks, celebrating our heroes. The Berbice Slave Revolution, Saturday, August 31st, Theatre Guild, Georgetown, 16 hours. That's 4 p.m. Hey fans, it's karaoke and oldies night this and every Thursday at Clock Twilight Sideline Dam, Buxton. Dance to the magical songs of yesteryear by popular DJs and Camps Audio. Admission is free. Come out. Let's make memories at Clock Twilight Sideline Dam, Buxton North.
Comes audio son. You burn this wine when no wire shine. The tree of life, them no wire climb, cause them heart no kind. Comes, I said them heart no kind. Buxton Massive, Kidaki, Redder.
You can get meat anywhere, but for the best cuts of chicken, beef, pork, mutton, and lots more, check out T&W Harris Butcher Shop, located in the East Rheinveld Market Meat Section. Call us on 609-7168, 641-4494. Ask for Rastaman. T&W Harris Butcher Shop for the best in fresh cut meats and lots more.
Thank you, Jillian. Thank you, Jillian, for visiting the Zelle. I encourage more of you to visit the Zelle and to visit the Cash App and leave something, because the thing don't run on water, right? The thing don't run on water. So as you know, the cost of living is higher, cost of living is going up, and so Camps TV has expenses that are rising too. And so those of you who have never contributed to the program, I encourage you to do so. Make a little financial contribution so we could keep our heads above water. Tomorrow's program I'm going to dedicate to raising some funds to Camps TV. So y'all keep that in mind. So start checking to see where you got all them small change stash and how much you're willing to give to Camps TV tomorrow. And bring out your checkbooks and so on and so forth, right? Good. Set up a Zelle account so you can send something to us by Zelle and so on, and a Cash App and things like that. But listen, Mr. Jordan was surgical this morning. Surgical. I like the kind of analyses, and those are the kind of analyses that will, I hope, open people's eyes. I see somebody is saying that there's some sections of Mr. Jordan's discussions which should be played every morning. I agree that it should be played every morning. Good? But we'll have to get somebody to get the video, do some editing, and package it. That's what we call it in the media. We have to have it packaged. Good? We have to have it packaged. And I'm going to endeavor to see how we can get it packaged so we can play it. Because imagine without oil resources, teachers were getting 6.7% of the budget. And with oil resources, they're getting just what? 3.8, I think, 3.8% of the budget. And the people managing this country's economy are shouting to the high heavens that they're doing better for teachers. There's a particular idiot who called me. I didn't tell you that a few mornings ago when I was talking about the wickedness of Mark Light and his courts. Well, I didn't get a chance to really see it. But in a gruff voice, he was, "You continue threatening Mark Light. You continue threatening Mark Light. I mislead the teachers. The teachers get the best deal they ever get." I hope that idiot is listening this morning. I really sincerely hope that idiot, that goon, is listening this morning. And I want to know if he's convinced, or if it is convinced, that it is the best deal for teachers still. The problem we have in this society, and we have to find ways and means of making it go away. The problems we have in this society is that as long as some of our pig-headed fools can feed at the trough of corruption and nepotism at the PPP's best, they're good enough with that. And they don't care what happens to the rest of us in this society. Good? I said it before. I don't understand how it is leaders, in this instance union leaders, can continue to make decisions which are inimical to the membership, inimical to workers in this society, and not look over their shoulders. I don't understand it. People construed it as me threatening Mark Light. I didn't threaten Mark Light. I will not threaten Mark Light. But Mr. Jordan reminded us that when Patrick Yard behaved in a similar manner, he had to get security. Whether formal or informal, he had to get security. Society was different now. I mean, society was different then to now. Things have changed. There were more people concerned about being patriots and standing up for what is right and defending their causes. And there were people concerned about filling their own pockets at the expense of the masses. Whither do we go? Where are we going? They're the kind of attitude that says, do what you want with me. Do what you want. We're going to roll over and we're going to take it. We're going to tell you, give me this side, that side, yes, sir. Happy for those who can take it. This side, that side, yes, sir. But I'm making it known loudly and clearly. I'd rather die on my feet than bend over. I'll have a good day. Blessings. See you tomorrow morning.